Developed by VR industry veterans Stress Level Zero, BONELAB is their latest product that takes your VR experience to a whole new level. Incorporating Boneworks' major features into Quest 2 for the first time, it provides little else to enhance the game's fundamental gameplay. This time, though, a fully featured system for adding mods might be able to save the day. The way you play BONELAB is pretty much the same as how you played its predecessor. It is heavily based on physics and can be both magical and annoying. This time, though, the game makes it clear that it is a sandbox and gives official support for modding in the hopes that the community will bring the fun. In Boneworks, players had to play about 9 hours of campaign before they could play in Sandbox Mode. In BONELAB, players are guided through each of the mini-games that aren't part of the campaign. These include combat and Parker time trials, a full-fledged sandbox where enemies and items can spawn, and some experimental mini-games such as physics bowling. It's a good idea because it lets players know right away what the game has to offer. BONELAB doesn't really hold your hand, that some people might like and others might not. Once you get to the part of the game called the lab with all the minigames, you'll need to look around and explore to figure out how to get to the campaign mode. After you've tried each mode and solved a small puzzle, you'll be able to play a 5 to 6 hour campaign mode that we found to be mostly boring and full of the same mistakes as Boneworks. Instead of going over them again, let's take a quick look at the criticisms. 1. A few voice recordings and text logs are used to tell a thin story. 2. Plain enemies and not enough of them. 3. Weapons that are boring and don't offer much in terms of strategy. 4. Weak puzzle and encounter design, and not enough interesting interactions. 5. Most of the time, climbing is a frustrating nightmare. However, the game loves to make you do it. 6. General crap with the holster system and the ways to interact with it. The quick swap avatar system is the only thing that is really new and interesting about BONELAB compared to Boneworks. When you switch between avatars, you can be fast and weak, strong and slow, or tall and skinny, among other things. You can also swap between avatars on the fly with a pull cord system. To do this, you reach out with your arm and pull a small ball longer and longer to move through the options and choose your avatar. We think this interface is very smart because it is quick, fun, and easy to use. The only change we would make is to increase the pitch of each sound effect to make it easier to remember that a certain pitch means a certain avatar was chosen. We would have loved to see BONELAB do more of this kind of creative interaction design that works directly with the game. And while it's a great idea to let players switch between avatars with meaningfully different abilities, we didn't find that the game's level design really took advantage of this as a core mechanic. Most of the time, it's clear which avatar you should use for a given task, and there's not much room for creativity, whether it's an enemy encounter or a puzzle. It's too bad because the idea of swapping avatars could easily be turned into a whole game. So, we didn't like the campaign part of the game. How about its sandbox modes, though? They have the same problems as the campaign, which is a shame. The main problem is that there aren't any really fun toys in this sandbox. Yes, you can bring back almost any enemy you faced in the campaign, but they aren't very fun to fight. You can also spawn any gun, but since they all work the same, it's not that entertaining to have the whole arsenal at your disposal. Boneworks, unfortunately, doesn't add up to more than the sum of its parts. It doesn't find a compelling way for puzzles and combat to work together, and it misses the chance to build a set of core ideas that lead to a climax in gameplay, story, and mechanics. Instead, it feels like a bunch of small game scenarios strung together on top of a new technical base with a little bit of story. However, there is a significant but in this situation. BONELAB, unlike its predecessor, has official support for mods right from the start. The studio says that players will be able to bring their own avatars, items, vehicles, and even whole levels into the game. This means that the game's community could make new things for the game or toys for the sandbox. In the long run, this is what will make or break BONELAB. The game's creators have said that they want to use it as a base for experimenting with VR. If that becomes popular, BONELAB could change a lot from what it is now. Before we move further down the video, if you want to stay updated with the latest VR trend and tech, consider subscribing to our channel to stay on the loop. With that said, let's get back to the video. Even with all of the criticisms above, we are impressed with how BONELAB looks and works on Quest 2. BONEWORKS doesn't have the best graphics on the headset, but the main look and feel of the game, as well as some cool trippy visual effects, have come through almost perfectly. The headset doesn't work perfectly though, and some later scenes slow down the game here and there. Even so, we didn't think the disruptions were bad enough to really change how we played, and the occasional crashes were annoying. Oh, and once again, the music is a jam. One thing BONELAB does right is make a world that is always interactive. Almost everything in the game world, besides the walls, ceilings, and floors, is based on physics and can be interacted with. This enables natural actions like as pushing open doors with the barrel of your rifle, pressing virtual buttons with your virtual elbow, and tossing adversaries over a railing to their deaths. You can do damage by slamming a door into an enemy, catching an ejected bullet case from the air, or scooping up and moving items with a shovel. This is frequently made more enjoyable by the game's always available slow motion, which gives you more time to consider the actions you choose to take. Using slow motion to perform amazing action moves, such as jumping from a platform and shooting enemies on the way down, switching a gun between hands for a cool reload, or seeing the fist contact with an enemy's face at full force, provided the majority of the game's enjoyment for us. But if you take away the slow motion, things seem a bit boring. When you shoot, all you have to do is point and spray, and when you fight, it often feels like a less fun version of Blade and Sorcery. Slow motion is the best way to make any of these things fun, mostly by making your own visual show or giving yourself a challenge to do something crazy. While the physicality of the game's objects is very solid, your own body frequently feels like a floppy jumble. Simple things like jumping and climbing are often frustrating, so it's strange that the game likes to make you do them over and over again. Even simple things such as climbing ladders and scrambling up a ledge can be very different from one person to the next. And this is a good example of a bigger problem with BONELAB. The game hasn't thought about whether or not it should be physics-based because it's too busy wondering if it can. The way the game's physics works sometimes makes the game less fun and more broken. For example, every so often you'll find a chest with weapons. It's easy to open because it has a nice red handle. However, when you do so, you shift the entire box 50% of the time, sometimes causing the contents to fall out. When BONEWORKS came out more than 2.5 years ago, it had the same problem. And yes, that might be physically correct, based on what the game knows about forces, but it's almost never what the player wants to do when they hold that red handle. BONELAB would be a superior game if the studio was more deliberate about when to utilize physics to drive interactions, and when to make allowances for usability. The game's holster system, like the weapon chest's red handle, has several obvious design flaws that may be fixed with a little care. BONELAB is without a doubt a tough game in terms of comfort. The game tells players right away that they should have a lot of VR experience before trying it, which is a good warning that everyone should pay attention to. The game doesn't avoid uncomfortable ways to play, like throwing you through the air, letting you turn smoothly in vehicles, dropping you from high places, or letting you slide down long, curvy sections of pipe. Plus, it was a real roller coaster ride, compared to its predecessor, which had a very springy climbing feel when it first came out, and gave us the worst case of proprioceptive disconnect I've ever had. BONELAB's climbing is a little bit better. Even though it's still shaky, it's not at all as bad as the first one. BONELAB's Sandbox Mode seems to have no limits, which means that you can slow the game down to a choppy mess if you spawn enough items. The choppy frame rates can be annoying, but the game never forces you to be in this situation. If you're usually sensitive to artificial motion, you might not want to play BONELAB. However, both Meta and Steam give you 14 days to return the game if you haven't played it for more than 2 hours, so you may always give it a shot and see if it works for you. Our research has led us to conclude that the gaming industry has enormous unrealized potential. With that, what are your opinions on this game? Let us know down in the comments below. Also, if you played this game, what were the most enticing parts that made you felt awesome? Share your thoughts on that as well. And if you want to get the most out of virtual reality experience, hit that subscribe button and press the bell icon for notifications so that you never miss any of our future uploads.